weeds? No problem. Kill weeds and grasses, roots and all, with a shot of Roundup. For driveways, patios, fences, make weeding easy. With Roundup, nothing kills weeds better.
Over the years, our hospitals and courts have witnessed some major public health scandals, tobacco and asbestos being two of the largest and most enduring. Well, right now, a new storm is emerging, and incredibly, the culprit may just be sitting on a shelf in your backyard shed. But the herbicide glyphosate, the main ingredient in weed killer Roundup, probably causes cancer.
A California man dying of cancer just appeared in court claiming a popular weed killer made him sick.
A California jury awarded nearly $300 million to a former school groundskeeper who sued Monsanto, claiming its weed killers, including Roundup, gave him non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Created by chemical giant Monsanto, Roundup is the most widely used weed killer on Earth. Sprayed on everything from gardens to footpaths to fields of crops. It is quite simply everywhere.
In August, a landmark court case blew wide open the question of whether Monsanto's Roundup products are safe.
He was using a sort of a pressure hose sprayer, so he was spraying 150 gallons every morning. And so his exposure was pretty extreme. And prior to his exposure, his skin was perfect. He was healthy. He had no other chemical exposures. But within 2 years after starting this sort of massive spraying, he developed this incredibly aggressive cancer that, ultimately is going to take his life.
In July 2001, our family took a vacation. We ended up eating 3 hamburgers before he got sick. We started to see blood in Kevin's diarrhea, so we took him to the emergency room, and they said kidneys were starting to fail. To watch this beautiful child go from being perfectly healthy to dead in 12 days, that this could happen from eating food.
Cut fruit, cut cantaloupe, strawberries, caramel apples, tomatoes, onions, chicken, all these products are likely contaminated.
I ate a salad, and now I have long-term health effects from it.
Monsanto is the world leader in biotechnology. 90% of the GMOs grown on the planet belong to them.
In Europe, only 5% of the food is genetically modified. Here, it's 70%.
Since welcoming agro-giant Monsanto into the country in 1996, Argentina has become the world's largest soybean producer. Today, nearly 100% of its soy crop is genetically altered.
GMO stands for genetically modified organism. Basically what it is food made in a laboratory. Until the last 20 or 30 years, this is food that has never existed before in humanity. So it's made in a laboratory, and more often than not, they're inserting viruses or bacteria into these plants.
Most of them have been genetically modified to resist the application of Roundup, like Roundup Ready soybeans.
In that they create a seed that is resistant to the types of chemicals that they want to apply to them. So for example, Roundup Ready corn is resistant to Roundup, which is the chemical that goes on it, or glyphosate, which is actually called.
That corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it and it will do nothing to it. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn.
Close to 100% of conventional farmers use Roundup to some extent. It's essential. We don't have an alternative to glyphosate in the system at the moment.
Monsanto's GMOs have inundated the world, principally in North and South America, Asia, and Australia. After only 10 years, transgenic crops now cover 250 million acres.
Since 1974, we've put on 1.6 billion kilograms, more than 3.5 billion pounds on crops in the United States alone. It's on 70 different food crops, including corn, soy, canola, wheat. So if you eat a slice of bread, a bowl of Cheerios, a sushi roll, a plate of pasta, slice of pizza, chicken nugget, Cheerios have more glyphosate per serving than vitamin D and vitamin B12.
Arpad Pustai, world-renowned scientist, lost his job when he warned about GE Foods.
We were dismissed for disobedience.
They fired us.
For the last 20 or 30 years, Monsanto has engaged in a systematic and deliberate campaign to attack any science that says their product is not safe and to attack any scientist that has the courage to say something. They have a corporate culture that has zero interest in safety and has only an interest in maintaining the ability of them to sell this product.
It is the safest herbicide that's ever been developed. It has just an amazing amazing record of not just productivity and use, but also the extent to which it has been examined and scrutinized and studied over 40 years.
Roundup was always marketed as incredibly safe, as so much safer than any other herbicide on the market. You know, some of the early salespeople would say, it's safe enough to drink, safer than table salt.
You can drink a whole quart of it and it won't hurt you.
You want to drink some? We have some here.
I'd be happy to, actually, but not really. But
if you say so, I have some glyphosate.
No, I'm not stupid.
Tell the truth.
It's not dangerous to humans. No, it's not.
So are you ready to drink one glass of glyphosate?
No, I'm not an idiot. I'm not an idiot.
If you go down the history of the sort of really bad chemicals, pesticides in US society or even world society, every single one of them has its origins in Monsanto. I mean, for the last 150 years, whether it be DDT, PCBs, Agent Orange, dioxin. I mean, Monsanto has been behind all of those. Monsanto has effectively made a business out of poisoning people and getting away with it.
If my life were a Superman comic, Monsanto would be Lex Luthor.
So you're in Monsanto in the early 1970s, and you've run into a little problem. The key ingredient in your flagship product, Agent Orange, had just been banned. Yeah, that Agent Orange. Which meant you were left looking for a new bestseller. Enter glyphosate.
Glyphosate, it was originally developed as a tank scalant. So to scale the calcium and other deposits, metal deposits, rust deposits from the inside of, underground tanks. And in 1973, Monsanto had to stop producing DDT. That was its flagship product. It needed another product. And it figured out that glyphosate, somebody at some point apparently threw some glyphosate on the, out in the back in the yard, and everything like green died where they touched it. And so somebody said, this will be a good herbicide because it kills all plants.
Thanks to glyphosate, you were able to create Roundup, the environmentally friendly Agent Orange.
Originally, Monsanto developed it as a herbicide, but the way that it was applied initially from 1973 to 1993 was in backpack sprayers. So guys would walk down the corn rows early in the season when the corn was competing with nearby weeds for sunlight, and they would shoot the individual weeds. Then in 93, somebody figured out a way that glyphosate, there was certain bacteria that glyphosate would not kill. And they said we could take a gene out of that bacteria and put it into a corn seed and develop a corn that cannot be killed by glyphosate. So they developed Roundup Ready corn. And that corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it and it will do nothing to it.
And within just a few short years, you had gone from selling a powerful weed killer to selling a weed killer and weed killer resistant seeds for crops like corn and soy.
So now you could fire all of those workers who were expensive, and you hire one airplane and they fly over the fields. They saturate the entire landscape with glyphosate. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn.
Soon, Roundup herbicide and Roundup Ready seeds took over the markets. Even if farmers didn't want to plant these GMO corn seeds, if neighboring farms were using Roundup, that Roundup would blow right over to their farms, killing their crops, forcing them to buy Roundup Ready seeds from you even if they didn't want to.
For seeds that are owned by Monsanto are there for one purpose and one purpose only, to raise the cost of food.
You had completely monopolized the corn and soy industry.
The United States is already the world leader in biotechnology, and we want to keep it that way. In 1991 alone, it was a $4 billion industry. It should reach at least $50 billion by the year 2000, as long as we resist the spread of unnecessary regulation. Unnecessary regulation.
And even though reports started coming out about how toxic Roundup was to humans, you didn't care.
There's many diseases that are linked to glyphosate exposure, including non-alcoholic fatty liver cancers are very closely linked. A lot of kidney diseases, and then severe damage to the microbiome.
A dream vacation in the U.S. Virgin Islands turned into a nightmare for one Delaware family. Apparently over time, the family was found in their villa on St. John Island, and the father was in a coma, and the two boys and the mom were suffering from severe seizures. EPA officials say a pesticide at their rented luxury villa may be to blame.
That Roundup has caused your cancer?
Yes, I am convinced, because it kills people out there too, Lee, not only me.
Do you think it's killing people?
Yes, it
it is killing people out there, then they should know that this product is not really safe to use.
In the 1970s, Monsanto used a company called Industrial Biotech Laboratories to test Roundup to get it registered with the US regulator, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. The lab was caught up in a fraud scandal.
It was found that this laboratory was actually just doctoring a lot of the numbers, sort of cooking the books, so to speak, on these safety studies. And our regulators in the US went in and did an investigation and found out, how fraudulent these studies actually were.
And they based that on a study, a mouse study, where the 70 or 80% of the mice got kidney tumors. You had another, they brought a Monsanto, and we got all of these internal documents from the Monsanto that show they were going to pay this scientist a huge amount of money, come in and dispute those findings. And the EPA let them reopen the test, and he came in and claimed that he found tumors in the control groups, but he never showed those tumors to anybody. They threw out the study, and they said, but Monsanto had to promise to redo the study. And in 40 years, they've never redone it. The whole thing was based on fraud from the outset.
Until eventually in the early 1990s, the EPA decided to just go along with Monsanto and overrule its own toxicologist. And in the final decision, in which EPA determined they would classify glyphosate as not likely to be carcinogenic, some of their own scientists refused to sign off on that.
But despite those claims, the manufacturer is still insisting their product is completely safe and has no links whatsoever to any cancer.
After the court verdict, the company's vice president, Scott Partridge, released this statement claiming more than 800 scientific studies and reviews support the fact that glyphosate does not cause cancer. Do the 800 studies all relate to cancer, or do they relate to other potential illnesses?
All types of risks and hazards and diseases, a wide variety, which we're required to do. When we obtain registrations from governments around the world, they don't simply ask you, does it cause cancer or not? They want to know all aspects of health and safety related to the product.
They had a guy called Jess Rowland, who was the head of the pesticide division, who sent a note to Monsanto saying, I'm going to kill this study by the ATSDR. I'm going to pressure them to kill the study, and when I do that, you guys need to give me a medal. So we had that email, and the judge wouldn't let us show the email to the jury.
Why?
The judges are funny. We thought it was relevant, but the judge thought it was too prejudicial. We got a hold through discovery of communications from the White House that showed that President Trump had sent during the trial a message to leadership of Monsanto saying, we have got your back. And that basically is the way that EPA has been behaving. EPA, even before Trump, was working hand in hand with Monsanto for many years.
The ag committees in the House and Senate are highly funded, and the members are highly funded by companies like Monsanto and their campaigns.
For example, the agricultural committees, the chair of those committees will always be the biggest receiver, of chemical and big ag. It's going to be Cargill and Smithfield and Monsanto, who are paying that guy's millions and millions of dollars over the career of that politician. And he's bought and sold and owned. He is a sock puppet for the companies. Everybody else in the division is working for him. They take his lead because their salaries all depend on him. He knows that he's preparing the groundwork so that he can have a soft landing at Monsanto or wherever else. He needs to do them a bunch of favors while he's still in office there. And then on the 20th year, he can go over and work for the company. But everybody in that agency is being schooled in that. So, the whistleblowers get weeded out and they get sent to offices in Dubuque where they can't cause any problems.
As Monsanto in the early 1990s, you were rolling in money, but it still wasn't enough. With a rap sheet like that, you would think your urge for poisoning people to get rich from it would be satisfied. But no, you had to take it one step further. And by the early 2000s, you had discovered something new. Something that would bring Roundup to not just soy and corn, but to everything we eat. Pasta, bread, pizza, cereal, even oats have been contaminated. To where today, glyphosate, this incredibly dangerous cancer-causing chemical, has been found in 80% of the US population. Yes, you watching this right now probably have glyphosate in you. especially if you're eating the standard American diets.
Nutrition and the microbiome was a huge piece of why cancer was happening in the human being to begin with. We have done something to our food chain. We have done something fundamental to our environment that would lead to this massive reversal in public health in this country. And so we took the glyphosate spraying maps, but interestingly, they don't superimpose on our cancer death maps until you pull in the tributaries of the Mississippi River. And you suddenly realize that we're collecting some 80-85% of all the glyphosate sprayed in the United States into a single water system. And glyphosate is unique that it's a water-soluble toxin, which means it's going to travel through this whole water cycle that would move through the ecosystem. And now you start looking at the stories that are coming out of the dead zone in the ocean at the end of the Mississippi River. It's now the size of Rhode Island, and we're getting these massive, devastating algae blooms in the lakes in the Midwest all the way up towards Canada, and it's killing the fish life. 75% of the rainfall in the South is now contaminated with glyphosate. 75% of the air we breathe contaminated with glyphosate, and we're becoming a very unresilient and damaged species where our fertility is dropping. 1 in 3 males in the United States now infertile, 1 in 4 women. And so as fertility drops, disease rises, children get sick. We move from 4% of the entire US population with chronic disease in the 1960s to 46% of our children with a chronic disease now in 2018 here.
Stay dangerous, and this is how Monsanto poisoned the world.
We will depend on them for every seed we grow, every crop we grow. If they control seed, they control food, they know it, it's strategic. It's more powerful than bombs. It's more powerful than guns.
And I'll never forget, he didn't pause a beat and he said, we just paid $3 billion for these television stations. We'll tell you what the news is.
When it comes to the media, really, it's not just the parent companies. It's also your corporate sponsors. It's also people that are putting out the ads. I mean, Monsanto, had this story actually aired, would have probably pulled their advertisement for Roundup, for aspartame, and all those other products that, again, aren't tested, but advertise all over Fox News. The reporters, they actually countersued against Fox under Florida's whistleblower statute. And as it turns out, under Florida law, they lost that lawsuit because it turns out it's not illegal to falsify the news.
You know, I've got a soybean in my hand here, and I can eat this soybean. It's very safe. Give it a try.
If you're like me and you spent most of your life eating all this terrible food that shouldn't even be allowed to be called food because you didn't know any better until now, then like me, your gut microbiome is probably wrecked. Inside your gut is a whole ecosystem of gut bacteria that helps break down food while also regulating your hormones and mood. Eating artificial food severely damages your microbiome, which can lead to literal depression and a ton of other horrible things like obesity and cancer. Thankfully, it is possible to fix your microbiome, which is why you gotta check out Koso. In Japan, Koso is the name for a traditional fermented enzyme drink that people typically drink for cleanses. This Koso drink took that ancient tradition and made it into the only 100% natural supplement on the market that has been clinically proven to improve your gut health because of all the probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, and enzymes in it. And this stuff actually tastes great. It tastes like a sweet juice, but it also has an herbal flavor too. It's really enjoyable. I take this stuff every day. I love how it really wakes me up in the morning. It's got over 500 reviews from verified buyers. Many have lost weight and improved their skin because of it. The ingredient list is filled with 100 plus vegetables, fruits, seaweeds, and mushrooms that have been fermented for a whole year. It's non-GMO and made in Japan. And all you gotta do is take 1 tablespoon a day and you're good. Highly recommend, so scroll down and click the link below or use code JAKE15 to get 15% off. Scroll down and click the link below now. Thanks to RS Koso for sponsoring this video. Roundup was always designed to be used early in the season so that it could kill weeds, and then it would get washed away by the rain.
And then in around 2006, they discovered that if you sprayed it on wheat late in the season, it would desiccate the wheat. In other words, it would dry it out. And one of the big losses for farmers in wheat is if it rains during the harvest season, you can't harvest it because it gets moldy. And so if you can spray a desiccant on it and dries it out and kills it, you can harvest it right away and it won't get moldy.
So suddenly, Roundup was being used throughout the season instead of just in the beginning. Whenever farmers were worried that their wheat, peas, canola, soybean, lentils, or rye were at risk of not drying out or getting moldy, they would spray the fully grown crops with Roundup to dry them out. Farmers would coat their crops with Roundup as close to as just 3 days before harvesting them, which meant, unlike when they were spraying it early in the season, that Roundup was not being washed off by the rain. All of these crops that were being harvested for you and I to eat were still completely covered in toxic Roundup.
So all the wheat in our country started being sprayed that year in 2006 with glyphosate. And that's the year you saw this explosion of celiac diseases and, gluten allergies and all of this stuff.
So if you were making billions before, you couldn't even count your riches now. You had taken Roundup to a whole new level, and life could not be any better. But there was just one tiny problem. People were starting to ask questions about the effects of Roundup on their health, and researchers were starting to connect the dots between Roundup and a long list of deadly diseases people in regular contact with the product were getting. So if you wanted to protect your product, reputation, and money, you would have to find a way to cover up the truth and fast. According to you, glyphosate poses zero risk to humans when used according to the label instructions. So let's take a closer look at what the Roundup label actually says. Harmful if swallowed or inhaled. But it's fine to spray crops with it right before it's harvested? That's because even though the Roundup label clearly says Roundup and glyphosate is toxic, you've done such a great job at marketing it as safe and biodegradable that farmers believe it even if it's not true. And this was a very intentional effort. Over the years, you've paid scientists to ghostwrite research papers that claim glyphosate is safe when it really isn't. You've also paid scientists to contradict papers that say glyphosate is dangerous. You've even planted fake journalists to push the media into believing your narrative on glyphosates. Quote, we recently learned that a young woman falsely posing as a freelance BBC reporter at one of the Roundup cancer trials was in fact a reputation management consulting for FTI Consulting, whose clients include Monsanto. The woman spent time with journalists who were covering the Hardman v. Monsanto trial in San Francisco, pretending to do reporting, while also suggesting to real reporters certain storylines or points that favored Monsanto, end quotes. And you even made sure your executives buddy up with the regulators who are supposed to oversee your products, which might be the reason why the FDA refuses to test the levels of glyphosate in products like oat and wheat. And thanks to this all-out marketing war, you managed to fool the world into thinking that Roundup really isn't all that bad for you. And with Roundup and glyphosate as the last thing on consumers' mind when they shopped, the floodgates were opened, and millions of Roundup contaminated products began to flood the supermarket aisles. By the late 2000s, farmers were spraying Roundup on anything they needed to dry quickly. Wheat, lentils, canola, millet, oats, peas, even rye was dried using Roundup, which meant that not even wheat-free rye bread or pasta was safe. In 2018, independent researchers tested common supermarket products for glyphosate contamination, and the results they found were shocking. Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, Kellogg's All-Brand Buds, General Mills Wheat Chex, Mueller's Penne Pasta, and dozens of other pizza, crackers, and oat products in America and Canada contained significant amounts of glyphosates. It wasn't just corn and soy anymore. It was almost everything you could find at your local supermarkets. People everywhere were being poisoned by your toxic herbicide. And even though you had been making bank off of Roundup for years, the walls were slowly starting to close in. Slowly, people were connecting the dots to all the diseases associated with Roundup contaminated food. So it was time for you to pack your bags and get out while you still could.
It's finally official. Germany's Bayer is now the world's biggest agricultural chemicals and seeds maker. That's after it closed the purchase of US rival Monsanto on Thursday.
In June 2018, a German big pharma and chemical company called Bayer bought Monsanto for $63 billion. It was a huge acquisition, and Bayer thought they were acquiring an agricultural cash cow, because by then Roundup had become the most widely used herbicide in America, and they were able to buy the entire company for just $63 billion. It was a steal, or so they thought, because oh boy, they were in for a surprise.
Friday, a jury in San Francisco found biochemical giant Monsanto liable for former school groundskeeper Dwayne Johnson's cancer.
Because just weeks after Bayer's big win acquiring Monsanto, Monsanto lost its first landmark lawsuit claiming that Roundup does indeed cause cancer. But luckily, Bayer just bought you out. So you didn't have to pay the $190 million in damages for that, or for the 2 lawsuits that followed. It wasn't your problem anymore, it was Bayer's. And guess what? Since then, 18,400 other lawsuits have been filed against Monsanto. But again, not your problem. You had made billions poisoning the world's food supply with Roundup, but because you got out just in time, you get to walk away scot-free, without a dime coming out of your pockets. And Bayer, even though they're still convinced, air quotes, that Roundup is totally safe, this has gone down in history as one of the worst corporate deals ever. And you want to know how they're trying to poison you next? Lab-grown meats. That's right. 2 companies just got approved by the good old FDA to sell lab-grown chicken meat to a restaurant near you. And these 2 companies alone are loaded with nearly $1 billion in funding, all to convince you that their artificial meat is just as healthy for you as real meats and better for the environment. When in reality, that could not be further from the truth. Lab-grown meat is going to be horrible for you. It's filled with antibiotics, cancer cells, and a bunch of other terrible things they don't want you to know about. And we expose it all in our newest video on our other channel, Evil Food Supply, that you can watch right now by clicking the card on the screen. Click the card on the screen to watch now.